what do you think is the ongoing cost to own a cruising vessel in the Caribbean
About 15 to 20% of the cost of the vessel
every year?
every year.
Besides engine hours, what is the most critical concern to be aware of when it comes to engines?
Making sure that your seals are good and all of the fluids are flowing as they should.
How many boats a year do you generally survey?
Around 35 to about 50, but now I'm on track for 80 vessels and more.
And what is the biggest surprise you've had during a survey?
Bilge full of oil on survey day.
How many SAM's credential boat surveyors are there in the Bahamas, Edvardo?
I am one of three.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. This is Full Displacement, the podcast by Current Yachts. We're thrilled to have today a guest whose name is Edvardo Humes, and he's from Archipelago Marine Solutions. And actually, we met Edvardo during a survey. We're very impressed with his knowledge and his expertise, and we asked him to be a guest on the show today. Most buyers focus on the purchase price of a vessel, and Edvardo lives on the other side of that equation. So he surveys boats before they change hands. He's also very privy to the cost of not just buying a boat, but owning and maintaining a boat. He's located in the Bahamas. He has this extra layer of knowledge that most mainland surveyors cannot offer because he sees boats that have been in tropical saltwater conditions year-round, and he's part of a market where obviously service is harder to come by because there's just fewer trained technicians. There's less access to haul at yards. So he really has this extra layer of knowledge that very few people can have in that environment. This episode is for buyers who have looked at boats and wondered, then what? After buying the boat, what comes next? Without further ado, welcome Edvardo Humes to the show. How are you?
I am pretty good. And again, thank you all. It's always a pleasure to be here and also working with you two ladies, Amanda and Marilyn. And I'm doing good. How y'all doing?
We're doing great. Amanda, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thank you, Marilyn and Edvardo. Good to spend some time with you guys. Edvardo and I had enjoyed some really good conch salad last time we were down in the Bahamas, so I'm looking forward to doing that again.
Indeed. Indeed, indeed.
And so before we jump into today's conversation, we'd love to know more about you, Edvardo. So where did you grow up? What's your boating background? And then we have lots of questions for you today for buyers and sellers of boats. But first, who are you? Where do you come from?
Hello again. My name is Edvardo Humes. I am the principal surveyor of Archipelago Marine Solutions, and I am currently located in the Bahamas to conduct pre-purchase surveys, insurance surveys, and damage surveys here in the Bahamas and the Caribbean. And basically, I just advise owners and buyers on things they should do before and after owning a vessel.
And you were born in the Bahamas?
Yes, I was born, bred, and dead in the Bahamas.
What kind of boater are you? I'm dying to know. Are you like a power boater, sailboater, both, whatever comes your way?
I would like to consider myself both. Sometimes in life, it's good to take it easy on the water. That's where the sailing comes in. And then other times in life, it's just good to go fast. That's where the powerboat comes in.
You can have it
I
all.
would say I'm
That's
both.
good
Yeah.
philosophy. It's a good
Yeah.
philosophy, Edvardo.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into your line of work, not just the passion for boating, but the career that you've developed. How did you get into this line of work?
Okay, well, first of all, I started at sea as a deck cadet many, many moons ago. I think it would have been 2006. I started at what we have is a Bahamas Maritime Cadet Corps program. It's an after school program here in the Bahamas that basically introduced Bahamians that's still in school the maritime industry. I joined that program after high school, and shortly after that went to Harlan College, graduated, and after graduating Harlan College, I went straight out to sea as a deck cadet and spent some time out to sea, worked my way all the way up to Officer of the Watch, Chief Officer, and ultimately Master 500 gross tons. And then I decided to work on yachts. Actually, servicing the fiberglass industry. And shortly after that, I came home and wanted to give back to the owners because I've been on the side where I'm working and maintaining them. And now with the surveying, I'm able to advise them on how to maintain them much better.
Can you tell us, as a surveyor, you're based in the Bahamas, are you carrying any of the SAMS or NAM certifications?
Yes, I'm currently certified with SAMS, also a ABYC member, and also a part of the International Maritime Association of Marine Consultants and Surveyors based in the UK.
Oh, that's terrific. Can you say a few words about this? Does it mean you're connected to your peers? What does that mean to you in your career as obviously a marine specialist? Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, so being a part of the survey groups, basically it sets a standard. So SAMS, as we are aware of, SAMS and NAMS is very big in the United States. They basically have survey standards that they survey by. And by following these standards, you're able to basically give a complete analysis of the vessel and the scope of work that you're about to undertake. ABYC has a manual about right here, actually, and this is the standards on which we basically survey your vessel on. So it has all of the codes, it has all of the everything with how the vessel needs to be built, how it's to protect, everything.
All right, terrific. And actually, we produced a video recently to talk about the ABYC building standards. We contrasted that with CE. So we'll put the link in the description below. And Edvardo, it sounds like you're also connected internationally with this other organization from the UK. A few words on that?
Yes, it's also similar like Sam's, but that was more like the commercial side because I spent over a decade in the commercial side as a deck officer, transiting the world, different ships and cargo, soulless class. Those are the types of standards and certification that comes with that.
All
And so
right.
I've been in the industry about
Yes, you have.
16, 17 years now. Yeah.
And just to brag a little bit on Edvardo, he is now looking to be a pilot and joining that portion of his career now this way. So props to you, Edvardo, and continuing to grow and do more.
Thank you.
One of the first questions that we discuss with our clients who are new to boating is understanding not just the cost of buying a boat, but the cost of keeping and maintaining a boat. And there's this very well known rule of thumb in the industry that it takes about 10% of a boat's value per year to maintain the boat and to just own the boat, from insurance to berthage to maintenance. What would you say this number, this rule of thumb number give you? Is it a fair estimate? And when people ask you that questions, what do you answer?
I've heard that from when I first joined the industry. And so I would say about I would move it up to about 15, actually 15 to 20% to be realistic with you. And when you're moving or actually dealing with vessels in the islands, the Caribbean, the Bahamas, it can even go higher as 20%. All of these are inclusive of dockage because the Bahamas and the islands, we don't build boats. We don't have that much of equipment, spare parts. Everything has to be outsourced. All of these can cause the price to rise. Also, fuel cost is rising. And so if you want to actually be on top of things and maintain the vessel the way it should be. So it would not only give you better performance, but also retain its value. I would say about 15 to 20%.
And I have a question for you, Edvardo. What do you think is the number one cost that most first time boat owners are surprised by in year one? Like, oh, I didn't expect the cost of the bottom paint to be that much. Or like, what is the number one thing you hear where you're like, what? How can that be?
Everything would be engines. Engines would be the number one cost. For an example, outboards. If you just buy a new vessel, outboards, and you neglect to rinse them with fresh water, salt content builds up. All of these things can have an effect on your performance, cause the engine to be overheated. All of these things. Deferred maintenance is also huge. So I would say engines. If it's a cabin cruiser, the hydraulic systems, dependent on how they operate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've actually heard the hydraulic systems too. And what most people don't understand is, they think these outboard engines are so much easier to maintain, but the lower units still take maintenance. And, sometimes you have to service them outside of the water and not inside the water as people think to tilt up. So, it's interesting to hear those two things coming from you.
Yes, yes.
And we've actually developed a spreadsheet to give you kind of a starting point for what it takes to own a boat. And we'll share the link to that spreadsheet as well in the description. But I think obviously the maintenance of the boat is important. And that can include, general in the Northeast, we have winterizing and then we have spring commissioning. But in the islands, it would be just year round maintenance, potentially haul out during hurricane season, storage. We've discussed engines, but bottom paint, as Amanda hinted to earlier, and insurance. What do you see in perhaps the Bahamas as far as insurance trends? Do your clients share with you what they've seen as far as rising costs? You mentioned fuel costs, but insurance is also a big one.
Yes. Here in the islands, we are prone to hurricane season. And so the insurance companies actually have in their agreement that a vessel should have a hurricane storage facility during the hurricane months. This is something that can cost depending on timing, scheduling. If you're down in the south and the hurricane facility closest to you is up north, if that occurs, travel costs, fuel, all of that incurs with storing your vessel during the hurricane season. And then also during the hurricane season, if there is a hurricane or storm, the insurance companies would pay. So it depends on which insurance company you're also working with, but definitely it's definitely a pricey part of ownership.
And it is something we see in the Southeast as well, right? Amanda, clients routinely have to move their boat out of a particular region, or if they're a buyer in Florida and don't intend to stay in Florida, isn't it like a June 1 cutoff sometimes? What do you see, Amanda?
Yeah, usually the start of hurricane season, you have to get the boat out of that zone if you want to have a lower tier or price point. I didn't have that luxury as a liveaboard and had to stay in hurricane zone during hurricane season, and therefore my premium was much, much higher than someone who had the luxury to either go north of North Carolina or south of Grenada and completely get out of that hurricane zone. But, one of the things we see in Fort Lauderdale and most likely the Bahamas as well is most of these insurance companies wants the boats to be hauled out of the water come hurricane
Yes.
time. And in Fort Lauderdale, where real estate is astronomical, and in the Bahamas, where real estate is very,
Rare.
very tiny and there's not much of it, it's very hard to have that and the haul out yard facility and being strapped down and all those different things. So if you're one of the lucky ones that can have a slip and a dedicated space to haul your boat, great, get it up there, get it out of the water. But not everybody has that luxury. And therefore, the cost can be significantly different to have the boat in the islands during hurricane season,
Yeah.
but it is a requirement, so
It
it
is.
must be done.
And I would add to that the requirement to plan early, as Edvardo was saying, because we're approaching May timeframe. That means, a transfer of ownership around the June timeframe, which is when you need to have a plan made, and it
Right.
might get difficult. Again, talking to professionals in the industry, asking the right questions will help, but the sooner you can get going on this, the better off you will be. I wanted to return to the engine conversation because that's a lot of your expertise, Edvardo, when it comes to understanding systems of boats. And I'd like to speak a little bit more about the engine in the perspective of a new buyer who does not understand yet engine maintenance. So kind of take it back to the basics. If you could share with us the most common engine problems that you see in the boats that you survey, if we start there, what are the things that you've observed?
Deferred maintenance, a lot of seals go bad. Not changing the seals, overheating of the engine. So basically the sea strainers are clogged. So a vessel comprises of a lot of systems that works together. Engine oftentimes overheat because either the sea streamers were clogged or there's a bend in the hose line that doesn't give good flow of fluids, oil not being changed, all of these things, not flushing out the engines when it comes to um all of these basically corrosion. I would say it's been a few things together. Corrosion on the seals, a lot of that vibration, engine mounts not being sturdy, so that causes vibrations as well. There's a few things regarding engine issues I've come across in the field.
And I'm noticing a bit of a pattern in what you just kind of spelled out. A lot of this can be prevented. A lot of this can
Yes.
be addressed with good preventative maintenance, having eyes on your engine block before you start your boat. Inspect your engine bay, your engine room, right? See what you
Yes.
can find because the telltales will be there. And then inspect again once you first start the engine, make sure everything's running properly. Take note of questions that you may have, like some of the description of, uneven mounts or drippings or,
Yes. I would also add temperatures. When it comes to
okay.
an engine, temperatures tell a lot of the story. If you start the engines and you realize that the temperatures were consistent, and then all of a sudden you start your engines and you see that they're either spike or they're higher, this should raise concern. So just pay attention to oil pressures, temperatures, sensors. Make sure your sensors are in good working order. These are little stories that the engine and also a vessel tells you. A lot of times it's a big incident doesn't happen all at once. It starts small. In the field, for an example, I did a survey on a vessel and they s- they neglect to fix the exhaust manifold and exhaust part for $300. Shortly after that, it cost them, I would say, about $20,000 to repair for a $300 part. These are um little small things in the industry. Hose get deteriorated, they don't change the hose or they don't pay attention to hose. All of these things happen. Seals also, they don't pay attention to seals, allow water to get inside the engine. That's another situation. So small things lead to big things whenever you have deferred maintenance.
Good point.
Just one more reason to have somebody come out if you're not doing it yourself, or not trained to do it yourself. It pays to have someone come out and check these little things because, like you said, a $300 part can prevent a $20,000 problem. And we all know that the resale value on these vessels depends on the maintenance. And if a boat has been sitting for a year, you're going to feel the asking price in that consequence, basically. Spending a little bit of money to have somebody go out, check the boat, maintain certain things, if you're not able to do it yourself or you're not there or available, makes a world of difference comes the time when you have to sell the boat. Tell us though, Edvardo, is there a difference between diesel versus outboard? Does that environment affect one more than the other? When you talk about corrosion and seals, one is exposed, one has the cowling over the top, and that's it.
With regards to diesel versus outboards, diesel engines would cost more regarding maintenance preferred, but you once maintain, my personal experience, you get much more life out of it. Outboard as well, should you flush it and maintain it, you get a good usage out of it. Me personally, I would not really have a preference. It just depends on diesel is much more components. Yeah, I would say diesel. For me, a diesel engine, very well maintained, I would take a diesel over an outboard. For me,
Okay,
me personally.
that's very interesting, especially considering we've seen the trend in the industry where power boats are now sold at an overwhelming majority with outboard engines. But again, for certain types of vessel, diesel is the go-to. A lot of sailing vessel in particular run forever and for thousands upon thousands of hours. So It goes back to some of the things we share with our clients. It's not so much how many hours are on the engine, but how was that engine or those engines maintained? And if you have the
Yes.
answer to that equation, it's worth a lot. So, something
Yes,
to
it
keep in
is.
mind.
Yes, it is.
If you find this podcast helpful, make sure to subscribe to the Full Displacement podcast. And now let's get back to the show.
Also, what I find also with diesel engines, the basics of engineering when it comes to diesel, once you have compression, air, and fuel, you're good to go. Outboard engines with the gas and all of these things could complicate things, but diesel engines, you're pretty much good to go.
Okay. So fuel polishing, people recommend fuel polishing for these older diesel systems where.
Oh, yes, you could recommend full polishing, but that depends if you were to do a survey and you notice that the rake core is not a normal color. Also, when it comes to surveying the fuel tanks, that's not something that we actually do because we don't open the fuel tanks. That's destructive testing, and then you have to reseal them and all of these things.
Yeah, we.
We, as surveyors, would recommend if you have the shift in climate, like say if the vessel was way up north and it's been sitting for a while with diesel in it and it's been laid up for 2, 3 years, then that's almost as a given. Did they use fuel treatment? Was there fuel treatment involved? If that's not the case, then we just allow you to polish it or clean the tanks. Depending if the age of the vessel, we could just recommend you just fully clean the tanks.
Yeah, it's definitely rule of thumb. What about, you had mentioned before the exhaust elbow? It's the single most overlooked failure point, and you said it's a small little
Yes.
piece that can cause some major problems quickly. And one of the main things that I do every single year on my engine is the impeller. No matter what, I have a date on there and I change it every year. Even if I haven't done the hours on the engine that I wanted to do in that year's time, I still change it because impellers can get, they're rubber and they can get brittle and they can break off and all those different things. What have you seen in the industry about impellers and some of the headaches with that?
Like you mentioned, impellers should be changed regularly. It's actually a part that is very much overlooked and it's very, very, very cheap. It's a couple dollars. And it's very important for the flow of water and for the cooling of everything. It's very essential, but it's again one of those parts that are overlooked and cause serious issues.
Agreed. Don't wait till it fails. You failed
Don't
if
wait
it
till it
failed.
fails. Yes.
Get this question a lot, Edvardo, and I'd like to hear your response. I know what mine is, but I'd like to hear yours. A buyer will come to me and they'll say, well, this boat's got 800 hours on the engines, and this one, and they're diesel engines. And this one has 3,000 hours on the engines, but this one's been sitting for the last 2 years with the 800-hour engines. And this one has been an owner operator, fully maintained, has a completely good log and maintenance book. Which one would you choose?
Ooh. 800.
On a boat that has been neglected and not maintained.
The hours vast is too great. I would go
Okay.
with 800. The only thing as an owner, I would suggest that you put some money into it. It may require some money. Like we talked about, getting everything changed, engine rebuild, hoses checked. Um, Especially if you are planning on using it very much so. Both are diesel engines. Yeah, I would go for the 800. Me personally would go for the 800.
Yes. Okay. Interesting. I would say, hey, don't be afraid of the 3,000 hours if the rest of the boat is good. Don't be afraid of it. I actually would be more cautious going into that boat that's been neglected than one that has been well maintained with the higher engine hours. Now, that's why I asked you, is because everybody's opinion is different and their threshold of risk is always a little different.
Now, again, that also goes back to basically the exact same type of vessel. One has been neglected for 2 years. One has not, but has 3,000 hours on it. The usage, that's a big difference. If it was like 1,500 hours, by all means. The maintenance log is very much important because that means that the vessel was cared for. It would have had a much better maintenance program. But I'm looking at the longevity of the engine hours complete. When an engine gets around, I mean, depending on some diesel engines, you could go up to 40,000. I mean, depending on how it's being maintained and rebuilt, and you can really get some years out of a diesel engine. And so my upfront costs would be much more. I would put more money and maintenance and try to establish a planned maintenance schedule for the 800-hour vessel
Mhm.
versus the 3,000 that's just continued. But me personally, I would go with the lower engine hours.
It might cost you more up front, but in the end, it saves you down the road, which is an
Yes.
interesting.
And if you had to advise a client who's looking to buy a boat that's been sitting, and so imagine it's a single engine on maybe a sailboat and it's 50 to 60 horsepower Yanmar type vessel, what do you think roughly is the cost to do like an engine overhaul? Like to do all the things that you presume haven't been done properly and to do all the maintenance and kind of start from fresh? What would you say that cost is roughly? Like less than
Here in
$2,000?
the yeah, around there. Here in the islands, it could be a little bit more depending on your haul
Okay.
out. When you're thinking about doing all of these maintenance, you have to look at the vessel has to be hauled and the
Sure.
vessel has to be stored
Yes.
and all of
This
and
is
then if
assuming the
the
boat's already undergoing some other works, and so you're, as
Mhm.
part of this, going to do an engine check and overhaul and just kind of the basic, okay, assuming this hasn't been done and should have been done, if we did everything related to the engine.
around 25 to 35 is, I would say, safe bet. Should
Okay.
should really be good.
And
Yeah.
then contrast this with the cost to repower a diesel engine on a sailboat like this. What would you say the cost? Ballpark. I won't hold you to it, but
Mm,
just to give a sense of comparison. Can you speak to
I
that,
would
Amanda?
not.
Have you had clients that had to
Yeah,
repower
I
it?
Yeah,
mean, for one, it really has to it depends on how difficult it
it
is to get
depends.
the engine out of the boat. Do you have to get a crane? Does it have to back up to a dock? I mean, that there's
Yes.
so many variables to
So
that.
let alone the logistics and the labor, but the cost of the block alone. How much is a new engine for
Oh,
50 to 60
a
horsepower?
what, a 50 horsepower Yanmar might be what, $6 to $8,000 when you can find it, but then it's the labor to install it, to get it there, to get the other one out, and then put the shaft and everything back together again and hook it all up. So that's the majority of the work. And, the actual engine itself, the block of the engine, maybe a little more, 8 to 12, I would think you could get
Mhm.
one for.
But then
Yeah.
contrast this too with the downtime and all the unknowns surrounding that experience and getting that engine there and having the right labor and technician and all of that is it's such a huge task. When you're buying a boat to go cruising, is that what you want to be doing? Or do you want to just go sailing? So again, comes down to your comfort level with the availability of maintenance records and your comfort with doing that maintenance yourself down the line or learning because it's not difficult to learn. There's lots of great resources online to do that. The first thing you could do is just kind of look over the shoulder of your technician if they're not turned off by it completely. Sometimes they don't tell you when they show up at the boat to do the things, but if you're on your boat, just look at how they're doing it, and then YouTube is your friend. There's a lot that you can do on your own. Read the manuals, educate yourself, and then ask questions from your technician.
Another thing I would like to add is in my line of field, I recommend sometimes an engine survey. It's not common and persons don't do it. They just prefer a pre-purchase survey. Now, conducting a pre-purchase survey is great, but I recommend sometimes an engine survey. An engine
Absolutely.
surveyor is a separate cost. That would tell you everything. He brings his computers. Basically, you go for a sea trial. He's able to tell you pressures, Bosco. He's able to give you the full logistics of that engine. Sometimes just don't take that advice. And then a year and a half down the line, they have engine problems. Whenever you're about to make an investment, buying the vessel isn't expensive. Maintaining it is. And so what I always recommend my clients is if you're serious about this, do as much investigation as possible. Do your pre-checks, have your pre-purchase surveys, have your engine surveyor, check the vessel for sea trials, see how it performs, and then make an analysis of it. S- 5 to 10, spending $5 to $8,000 on the upfront to make an investment on a $1.22 million vessel is nothing. But
Correct.
sometimes buyers do not want to actually do the work to do the investigate, to investigate the vessel properly. And so there's a slogan in the industry which is BOAT stands for break out another thousand. If you don't do your due diligence, when something goes wrong, you will definitely have to bring out another thousand. And
Or two.
so that's, or two, or two. And so that's something I often advise my clients, especially with the pre-purchase surveys.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's very good advice. Same here. We definitely recommend, on these larger engines when the hours are up higher, not even just going as far as an oil sample survey, taking those oil samples at survey, go one step further and actually get the mechanical survey on the engines. Let's switch
Yes.
a little bit now from diesel engines and talk more about outboards and
Right.
maintenance around outboard engines, since we've learned from our previous podcast with Infolink about the trend moving from inboards to outboards. Can you talk a little bit more about the maintenance on that?
The maintenance with outboards are pretty much simpler. Once you have your flush, it's pretty much compact. It's easier to, I would say, replace an outboard. You don't have to do any cutting. You don't have to do any. It's just like a plug and play. You just off one, on one. But the maintenance on an outboard is much simpler. Once you keep your flushes, your fluids intact, you check your oil, you change your oil with the required time. It's pretty much easier. And so there's definitely a trend in moving towards outboards because of the ease of maintenance and ease of replacement. Very much easy to have outboards.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I mean, you have a hull that can last 30 plus years, and you know
Yes,
that those engines aren't going to match that. So to be able to, like you said, take one off, unhook it from the harness, the wiring harness, put another one on, plug it in, you're good to go. And,
good to
I
go.
have done maintenance on both, and I'm telling you, it's really easy to just drain the lower unit oil out. It's so much
Very much
easier
so.
than bending over and trying to get in these small spaces to do your
With the
maintenance.
diesel engines, yes, you don't have to worry about no shafts. You don't have to worry
Yep,
about none of the seal. It's just
yep,
plug and play. It's pretty
right.
much, yeah.
And I think
It's
that
much
is why
easier.
we're seeing the trend, because obviously the harder maintenance is, the less you're going to want to do it. And the
Yes.
easier it is, like you said, just get into a routine, do those saltwater flushes, check your anodes, and the annual maintenance on an outboard engine. What would you suggest that is per se diesel engine every year, the cost?
If you're doing it yourself, like you basically said, the lower unit, the oil, what would that cost if you're doing it?
Couple $100, under 1,000?
Yes, it would definitely be under 1,000.
Yeah, per
Definitely
engine.
be under 1,000 per engine. Definitely. Maintenance costs. Diesel would be much more.
Yep.
But yes, the outboard. And then the outboards, you can kind of do it yourself. If you
Yep.
watch a technician do it
Yeah,
2 or 3 times, you can do it yourself.
I've done it.
Change, spark,
It's
yeah,
just too
touch,
easy. You
change the
take the
plugs.
screwdriver,
Yeah,
drop the pan down there,
yeah,
oil drains, pour some in, good to go.
yes.
Yeah.
Have your salt away. Do your
Yep.
salt away flush. It's very much easier. Spray it on your components. Make sure your Callan seals are good because the salt corrosion, once you keep the salt out, spray down your engine with WD-40 or Corrosion X.
Yep.
You're pretty much good to go.
The Bow Shields T9 is my friend.
Yeah, yeah, indeed.
So I have a question that's a little bit more general because people, especially when they learn about boating and buying a boat, they really want to understand, hey, what's the best boat out there? What is going to last? What is going to be the most positive experience in terms of ownership and maintenance? And seeing as you are in one of the most demanding regions in the world as far as saltwater, UV, long, year-round season pretty much, with the exception of hurricane season, you've seen what the environment can do to all kind of boats. Do you think the reputation of brands means anything anymore when we say, this kind of boat, the Boston Whaler is the best there is, or this type of catamaran is way better built? What does that weight bring into the equation of a multi-year ownership experience? Does that hold any water, or is it really just again going back to the maintenance that each person will bring and the care they'll bring to their vessel? Do people ask you, hey, what's the best boat? And what do you answer?
Yes, does hold water to a point.
Okay.
You do have the brand names, and you do have vessels that are built completely different, lay up completely different, use the difference in fiberglass. And so that in itself, quality, you do have to take into consideration. However, it all goes down to the maintenance. It all goes down. If you're like in the Bahamas, if you do not wax and polish, you can have gel crack crazings and all sorts of things that the UV damage brings. Your elastomeric material could dry rot, all of these things, and then that deals with the seals, the water intrusion. So basically maintaining the vessel is, I would say, 80%.
Got
If
it.
you apply the 80, maintenance would definitely give you a much, much better outcome than buying a Freeman yacht or buying an Intrepid or a Boston Whaler and then neglecting it and then comparing it against a lower brand.
Got it. But it helps to start with the good fiberglass, the right build method, the right stainless steel grade, all of these
Right.
things, right? This is what
Yes.
reputation
That was
brings.
one of the examples I was gonna say. A thicker, heavier duty stainless steel is going to last a lot longer, even neglected, as opposed to a
Yes.
very thin, very quick level that you'll see corrosion in within, a
A
year
season.
or even 6 months in some cases. And you'll see that when a boat is less expensive, you're going to know that the cheaper grade of stainless, of fiberglass, of the glass material in general, you're going to see the wear and tear on that so much more quickly
Yes.
than you are going to see it in a better build quality to start with. So you have to compare apples to apples on that one. And that's why some of these name brands have their brand acknowledgement,
Their
is because
reputation.
they
Yes.
start with the good materials to begin with.
Yeah, really good point. We've already made the case, Edvardo, that a pre-purchase survey is an important investment upfront because you're getting ready to buy $1 million boat, a $2 million boat, and spending that money with the right person or people. That could be a team, right? You have your general surveyor and then an engine survey being done by a specialist is essential, right? What can you share with us is the day going to be like? If you book a survey with a client, what can they expect? Can you give us the morning till evening sequence of events for a survey with you?
Okay. So if you're booking a pre-purchase survey, I would recommend a in and out, basically the vessel to be hauled out. And so I would show up there in the morning, depending if the vessel is already under hard. What I would do is I would survey the underwater parts. I would conduct a phenolic hammock test, make sure that there's no delamination going on. Sounding, I would check all of the seals depending on the type of running gear that it has. I would check the rudders. I would basically make sure that your through hulls are good, that they're not dry rot. I would note the type of through hulls that they are, making sure everything is sealed. And then once the under water part of the vessel is fully inspected, then we would splash the vessel. Once the vessel is splashed, what I would normally like to do before I do the sea trial is I would like to start up all of the systems. Generators, make sure all of the pressures are good, test the electrical systems, make sure everything is good. Basically, all of the systems that require water. Pump, make sure that your water pump, if you're doing a pre-purchase survey, pumps are working good, your macerators are everything is working in good working order. And then after that, we would do a sea trial where we would test the performance. We would check your navigation systems, your GPS, make sure your compass are good. And then if it's a sailing vessel, we would hoist the sails, weather permitting. Make sure that there's no tears in the sails. If it's not a sailing vessel, we would just do basic figure of eights, check the performance of the vessel, and then bring it back. Making sure all of your systems is good, making sure all of your batteries are good. Yeah, bring it back, and we would have a good day. It would be a very eventful day.
When you say you test all the systems, coming back to the electronics, for example, if there is autopilot, you will verify the autopilot holds a course, correct?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
If you've got obviously charts, if the cards are present for the chart plotter, you verify that all the units not only just turn on, but actually display the chart and that everything is working as expected. If you don't have a read on depth and wind speed and you're supposed to, you will make a note of that in your survey report.
Yes, actually, in my previous one of my previous surveys, the GPS had us on land. The vessel was the vessel was
Whoops.
driving on land, and you'd be surprised to know the circumstances that happens. And it's easy for a surveyor to miss if they're not paying attention and actually have a checklist. And so all of these navigation systems to make sure that, hey, we actually are at this location. And so all of these checks is essential. Because it was funny, I
Another
looked at it and I'm like, oh, we're going over land.
Another thing that came up recently in one of our conversations on the podcast is whether or not you get all of the chain out to verify that the chain, the ground tackle, is in good condition. Is that a requirement from a surveyor under your affiliation? Is that a requirement under SAMS to do such a thing, or do you go out of the way and do it every single time, or only when asked? What's your process there?
My process when it comes to the anchor chain or the anchor road, it depends. I would first take into consideration the age of the vessel. And I would inspect that if the chain is of a good grade, G4 marine grade type of steel chain, I would look at it to make sure that there's no corrosion. If there is corrosion or there's sight of surface corrosion heavily, then I would extend the chain to look at the bitter end to make sure that everything is good. But if the vessel is within 5 years, the anchor is still shiny, you know, this is not something you would check. I would more so check to make sure that the ankle windlass is operational.
Very good.
Also, I would also check to make sure that the emergency winch is operational. Because sometimes the ankle windlass will be operational, but the brake for the emergency, it would not hold. These are key components whenever you're dealing with anchoring because anchoring in emergency situation can save the vessel um, very much so. And so this is something I would look at. If
Okay,
it's like
very
a
good.
1980s vessel compared to a 2015, yeah, let's run the chain out.
And do you assess the condition of the standing rigging and make any notes based upon condition and age? What's your typical process there for assessing the mast and the rest of the standing rigging when you're not sure how old that may be? What does that look like for you? What do you look for?
Okay, so um I would first ask the owner the track record of the vessel. If it had done like 2, 3 Atlantic crossings and it hasn't had a standing and rigging survey, because that's a separate survey, I would recommend a standing and rigging survey separate. The surveys I conduct from deck level has like crossed the Atlantic 2 or 3 times. I would also pay attention to a lot of the chain plates, the rigging, if there's cracks or corrosion, you can kind of verify, but these are checks that I would recommend a professional when it comes to standing and rigging survey to be done. That's a whole separate survey, especially when you come with the different type of booms, because carbon fiber different type of carbon fiber versus aluminum. These things require a little bit more technical expertise.
Yeah, and that's good. We often will refer and say you need a full rigging inspection from a
Yes.
rigger who does this every day, and knows what the cost is to replace these things. Because obviously, you, Edvardo, can't know everything about everything. And just like you refer
No.
to a mechanical inspection for the engines, you can also refer to a rigging inspection there. I know, and this is one of the reasons why I like working with you, but tell me, when there's a significant issue that's found, are you going to freak out and are you going to say, oh my gosh, look at this? Or how do you handle a situation when maybe a buyer and seller are both on board and you see and find something of a significant problem on the vessel? How do you handle that?
What I would first do is I would document it. I would take photos of it. I would write it down, and I will continue the survey and then go into an interview process because I want to make sure that if the buyer knows about it, then I would, just point it out to his attention. If he doesn't know about it, I would be cautious with the seller. I would also ask them if they are aware about it, or I would try to, I guess, come up with the cost price to repair. In the field, I've came across vessels that had structural issues. Pretty big on cost to repair. However, if the buyer is aware of these and he wants to undertake that, that's something that I would just put into a report. But you have to be very careful whenever you find things that can cost the buyer not to fully commit or walk away.
Yeah, what you're really trying to articulate here is you're here to give the best third party assessment that you can.
Yes,
And then it's up to the buyer to determine their willingness to take on any level of risk associated with that boat. And we're not
yes,
suggesting that you're not going to tell the true assessment, but you're trying to use the best judgment in sharing the assessment so that it's very clear whether or not something is minor or something is more critical. And when something appears critical, we then follow on and help the client assess the cost to repair or replace. And this is all part of the buying process, right? The negotiation.
You brought up a really good point, Edvardo. A lot of the times you're doing this, and both the buyer and seller are unaware that
yes.
this is here. And it takes you knowing and a third party, unbiased person to come into this equation and say, hey, I don't know if you knew this, but structurally, there is this big issue here that no one took into consideration. And the price point doesn't take that into consideration either. And so it's your job to diplomatically on both sides of this table, because both sides are financially invested in having the boat sell, but it could mean the world of difference if you made too little of it or made too big of a deal of it on both ends.
Yes.
So the diplomacy that goes both ways here is an art. And as a broker, I've seen the dance go both ways. So we really do appreciate it when a surveyor can remain very unbiased,
Yes.
and present the facts in his report and not blow something either out of proportion
Yeah.
or make something seem too little when it really is
And
something
I was
significant.
going to add when something comes out to be pretty significant, there's usually a conversation that takes place on the day of the survey. You don't wait until 3 days later when you issue your report. Surprise, this major thing is concerning to me. It would come up sooner, correct?
Yes. At the end of the survey, the surveyors would typically do is would give a preliminary report, whether it be over the telephone and just give especially if the buyer is not there. What I suggest is normally the buyers be there. But
100%.
if the buyer is not there, we just give them a preliminary report. Hey, these are the things I found. This concerning situations like that. For instance, I did a survey on a lagoon vessel, and they had a recall. There was structural damages along the bulkheads. And after doing investigation, it was found that this type of vessel from that year was actually recalled. And so what happened is the seller contacted the company of the vessel, and what they did was they were able to send someone down, get it sorted, and it was easy, simple. It was a simple fix. Instead of saying, "Hey, this this is situation and, you should walk away.
Yeah.
That's not
How did
something that we
you
do.
become aware of the recall from the shipyard, from Lagoon in this case?
Through investigation.
Very good. So this is also part of your network of
Yes,
surveyors and professionals in the industry. Very good point.
yes,
And going back to who should be at the survey, we highly recommend that the buyer be present. And
yes,
we normally have the listing broker as well present. And again, we're acting here as mediators in making this deal happen. We have two parties. One wants to buy the boat, one wants to sell the boat. And we're trying to meet in the middle when something like this occurs. So, again, some people buy boats without brokers and absolutely doable, but this is what we do every day. We're there to manage emotions, to manage findings, and to make sure that there's a fair outcome. At the end of the day, right? It's not just about getting the best price and squeezing every penny. It's making sure you get a fair price for a good boat and that there's no surprises. And as Amanda just said, sometimes neither of the party know about an issue. And the two yacht brokers, this is where they earn their keep. They're working together to make sure, in all honesty, all the findings are shared and the solutions are found. We're not here to just say, your boat's horrible, my client's not going to buy it. We're here to say, hey, you may not have been aware. It's a collaboration, truly, between two
yes,
parties.
And that's
yes, it
another
is.
reason why both parties are present, the buying broker and the listing broker, because then they could say to the other party, oh, well, your surveyor made that up. When they see it with their own eyes, and good surveyors will point this out, they'll go and they'll say, hey, both listing and buying broker, I want you to see this. And, in one instance, there was tabbing that was coming undone, and he basically stuck his knife underneath through the fiberglass of where the tabbing was coming up, to show us both. And no one could argue with the fact that the tabbing was coming up on this one point. So visually, when we went back and asked for some money off post survey, it wasn't like, oh no, you made this up, or your surveyor was on your side, or this is why you are both present. Every party is present
Yes.
at the survey, so that there's no he said, she said at the end.
All of these are really great points. And Eduardo, you're based in the Bahamas, but you will survey boats anywhere clients want to see you, correct? You're not limited to just the Bahamas?
No, no, I am not. I am a flight away or two. You give me a
Two flights
call,
away?
and if it's within region, I'm definitely able to travel, and I have traveled before with many clients.
That's important to know.
So I think you all by now get this, and we've said it before. You thought boats were expensive to buy? Well, wait till you own one. And we're here to make sure you're aware and you come into this experience with your eyes wide open. Yes, boats are expensive to own, but it all comes down to your safety and protecting you and your loved ones when you're on the water. So really, we want you to thrive. And to thrive, you need to fully understand the picture before you sign, right? So we discuss maintenance, we discuss the environments and the impact that a salty tropical environment can have on your boat. We talked about engine and we talked about survey findings. Thank you so much, Edvardo, for sharing all your insights with us today. I will be sure to share the link to your contact info in our marine directory. This is where we place all of the details for the companies and the vendors that we've come across that we believe do a really good job in the industry. But don't take our word for it. You may find Edvardo's name and then do your due diligence. Contact Edvardo, contact others if you'd like. If you are in the Bahamas or the Caribbean or really anywhere in the world, as it turns out, Edvardo is here to serve you. Thank you again for your time, Edvardo, and guess we might see you on the next survey.
Thank you again, Marilyn. Thank you again, Amanda.
Thank you, Edvardo. Fair winds.
Fair winds.